From Machine Gun Kelly to Joe Budden Nick Cannon, and even his own mother. It's no secret that Eminem has been involved in countless amounts of beefs over the years. But what happens to the victims of whoever Eminem decides to fire shots at? It's your boy Leah. And today I want to show you how Eminem can either make or break someone's career and where those who did Eminem dirty are today. First, let's start with his very own mother, who is now regarded as the most hated mom in America. Eminem and his mother have always had an incredibly rocky relationship with Debbie Nelson, abuses alcohol and drugs while dealing with Masson syndrome during Eminem's childhood, and also facing financial challenges since she was a single mom. This led to Eminem attending more than 30 different schools as a kid. I would change schools 2-3 times a year. That was probably the roughest part, dropping out of the 9th grade. Eminem found himself working as a waiter in a diner. Even there, he couldn't escape. His mother's influence, she called his workplace so frequently that waitresses started hanging up the phone as soon as they heard her voice after each of these calls. It was also noticeable how Eminem's mood would change as he would become more somber and would often put on his headphones, retreating into his own world. The anger and resentment he built up for his mother would eventually reflect in his Reveal lyrics when his rap career really started to take off upon being signed to Dr. Dre in 1997, his song My Name Is literally resulted in a $10 million lawsuit from his own mother. But before this, Debbie released her own kind of diss track against Eminem. It was more of a spoken word piece where she expressed how hurt she was by her son's harsh lyrics. Later in the song, she asked the real Marshall Matz to please stand up and take responsibility for his actions, before then going on to file an official $10 million lawsuit in 1999. The basis of the lawsuit was defamation, with Demi claiming that she was never addicted to drugs, and that she did try her best for her son. In her lawsuit, she also claimed that Eminem's lyrics have caused her emotional distress and sleepless nights, also stating in interviews that she was now America's most hated mother, and because Eminem's music she would be abused in public and even spat on. In some occasions, Eminem's team's response to these claims was pretty simple, and enough to help him win the lawsuit comfortably with his stating Eminem's life is reflected in his music. Everything he said can be verified as true. Truth is an absolute defense to a claim of defamation. This situation led him to being ordered to pay $25 to his mother, with $23,000 of that going straight to Debbie's lawyers. In essence, their relationship was damaged over a minimal net gain for her. Eminem would continue his career constantly dissing his mom in numerous bars throughout his music, such as Cleaning Out My Closet, where he literally claimed he wanted her to burn in hell. Realizing they need to repair her public image, and more crucially her real relationship to her son, she came up with a strategy. That's when Debbie announced the launch of her book titled My Son Marshall, My Son Eminem in 2007, where she aimed to change the way that she was perceived by the public. What mother wants to be known as a pill-popping alcoholic who lives on welfare? To tell the truth, I was heartbroken. The LI started coming thick and fast, and not just for Marshall. I think he forgotten all the good times we had, and this book is my way of setting the record straight. Eminem's response, well, it was an entire song dedicated to his mother, named My Mom, which dropped on his album Relapse, 2 years after her book was. Although after this, their relationship would surprisingly heal in 2014. Eminem released his album, Marshall Matt's LP2, which has the song titled Headlights in this song. He said he was sorry for making songs like Cleaning Out My Closet and any other track where he slandered her name. He would then release a music video where he's seen hugging her in first person, although Debbie is still known as the most hated mother in America. And the relationship isn't totally healed, at least they're on good terms, yet the same cannot be said about Joe Budden, ever since he entered the game. Joe Budden had a wealth of talent, but had ultimately been through the ringer when it came to the industry, initially tipped off to be one of Def Jam's biggest stars for the future tracks, like Pump It Up, made Joey jump off into to a star and needed him a top 10 album with his self-titled debut. But unfortunately, things went wrong. In record time for Joe, once the Jay-Z-helmed era of Def Jam commenced in 2004, Joe saw his album The Growth wither into the archives. Without a release from there, he'd leave the label and go on a prolific independent run. Eventually, he'd find himself getting a second wind in his career when he linked up with fellow spitters such as Royce to 59, Joel Ortiz, and Crooked I to form Slaughterhouse. After releasing their self-titled indie debut in 2009, the news emerged that after a lot of back and Fourth, they had signed a deal with Eminem's Shady Records when the talks about signing with Shady Records began. Joe, thrilled by the idea of joining forces with a megastar like Eminem, shared his excitement speaking about the deal Budden mentioned, that he had always imagined the group would end up on a label like that. Once on the label, Slaughterhouse released their major label debut, which netted Budden highest best-selling record of all time when it peaked at number 2 on the Billboard. But unfortunately, the Slaughterhouse train would be derailed before their third album, which was expected to be known as Glass House, could be released from there. Budden began to transition into media and across his own podcast and everyday struggle on Complex, but regularly went to bat for Shady when co-host academics would try to critique him, while he initially tried to be a company man. The problems between the two all started with Budden's comments in regards to Shady's album Revival, which received really negative feedback throughout the record's rollout. Joe was critical of what he had heard about the project. Was his issues reaching a boiling point with M's attempt at tackling race relations on the song Untouchable? Never want to take these. Things lying down this soon prompted a response from Shady on Chloroseptic Remix, alongside 2 Chainz and Fresher with Marshall spitting. Not as raw as I was, walk on water suck my dick. Y'all saw the track list and had a fit before you. Heard it, so you formed your verdict while you sat with your arms crossed. Did your little reaction videos and talked over songs critiqued by M's D12 brother Bizarre, who felt the need to remind Budden that Shady Records pays your artautorals bills things. Came to a head when it was time for M's surprise album Mozzie, an album that dropped from nowhere in August of 2018. M aired out everyone who had written him off, not least of all Joe Budden. Not only was the album literally released on Budden's birthday, but it was also packed with bars that refer to his previous domestic violence charges. Eminem made it clear that he wasn't willing to overlook what he saw as Budden's betrayal. He even spoke about this in an interview with Sway, where they discussed the release as expected, but wasn't always willing to let bygones be bygones. And in a famous episode of JBP, he unleashed his thoughts on Shady and daringly claimed that he was a better rapper, alongside suggesting that there was a lack of substance. To his work by claiming that Shady hadn't said anything for the past decade, the battle lines were drawn between the camps. And soon Joe's Slaughterhouse brothers were taking issue with what he had done, despite how combustible things got initially. Budden later walked back some of his venom towards Shady when Music to Be Murdered By was released, even if he was a little hurt by the Trader Joe line. While Budden has let things slide, it's unclear how Shady feels about Budden now that the dust has settled. However, the dust never seemed to settle with Eminem's beef with Nick Cannon. To understand how Eminem brutally destroyed Nick Cannon, we need to go back to 2001 after the success of the Marshall Matt's LP, Mariah KY. Nick Cannon's soon-to-be wife reached out to Eminem for a collaboration on her album Charm Bracelet. And it was thanks to this that the pair actually formed a relationship lasting around 6 months. And the reason for their breakup? Well, Eminem said that when he got to know her better, he didn't like what he got to know, saying, quote, "I just don't like her as a person. I gotta be honest, I have respect for her, but she doesn't really have it all together." And after this, the broken-up couple would surprisingly fire shots back and forth at each other, with Eminem first referencing her in Superman and Mariah going onto the open show to deny any relationship with Eminem. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. And as you'll see later in this segment, she would also diss him a few times on stage during her performances, and Eminem would fire right back, exposing voicemails from her during his performances. After a few years go by with constant back and forth, their beef would really seem settled after Eminem would overdose on drugs and unfortunately enter rehab. But come April 2008, we are introduced to Nick Cannon in this feud, after he and Mariah Carey officially announced that they were getting married. Although unknowingly, Nick had just started a war he wanted no part of almost 1 year today of this marriage announcement. Eminem would release his song BPEs from B-Dad, where he straight up destroys the newly wedded couple relationship. He references Nick Cannon and Mariah many times throughout the song, where Eminem is heard saying some pretty disrespectful things to both parties. In response to this, Nickin was state in a now-deleted blog post, "I thought we got past the days where white men could spew vulgar obscenities at our beautiful queens and get away with it, so Miss Marshall, I'm going to make a wish you never spoke my name and regret the ungodly things you said about my wife." But Nickon did not know what he was getting himself into. A month after this, Mariah Carey released a song with disses on Eminem sprinkled without, which resulted in an absolute banger hit song called Obsessed, and I was like, why are you so obsessed with me? But Eminem once again would take this beef a step further after he would respond with the warning, where he spent an entire 3 minutes going in on Mariah and Nick in this track. Eminem throws barbs at Mariah and Nick Cannon, revealing details that were perhaps better left unsaid, such as the fact when he went on to quote that he nutted early and he ejaculated prematurely in other bars. He claimed that Mariah was an alcoholic, that he flew her out to his house numerous times, and even threatened to release phone calls between the two of them, which he did partially in verse 2 of this song, where he literally played voicemails of Mariah moaning and acting very sexual towards Eminem fans. Love this track. Although it's unofficially released, it still managed to receive 18 million views on YouTube. However, things were starting to bubble between the three people, yet it was about to get a lot more intense after Nanan would release his response diss track back to Eminem, titled I'm a Slick Rick Eminem Disc. But this one did not go so well in the Cannon's favor, as the song was filled with absolutely embarrassing bars like this one. Yeah, I know that was pretty bad, but trust me, his fans let him know he did himself with this track. He's delusional. If he thought that he could even compete with Eminem's level, I refuse to believe. This man listened to this and thought it was a good idea to release it. After this, the beef was basically dead, with Eminem stating in an interview that he doesn't want to keep beating a dead horse and that he was done with the whole situation. A few years later, after feeling like he lost the beef, Nick Cannon returned yet again, where he would go on to fire even more shots at Eminem. And if you haven't learned anything from this video, you would know that's a huge mistake he would appear on Hip Hop DX to make it clear that he was ready for another war, later on calling out Eminem for $100, 000 rap battle on Tim Westwood. He would then release another diss track on Eminem, which clearly was only for attention, and performed even more horribly. The track was titled The Invitation, and despite receiving 15 million views on World Star, the video would receive 600 dislikes in comparison to 100,000 likes, some notable, if you want to even call them that. Lyrics include you and Eminem, how you mad a star burst onto the scene and she called me the new pack. I ain't no killers, so don't push me, how the buys you all got me battling Elvis Pusley. Yes, he literally said that this is pretty much where the beef finished, and the results for Nick are awful. Nowadays, it looks like his relevance is on the decline. His beef with Eminem seemed more like a desperate attempt to stay in the spotlight than anything else, and as a result, his reputation has taken a bit of a hit. Guests would come onto his show and just make a mockery of him, such as MC Miller, and his relationship with Mariah is no longer a thing. It looks like Nick found the hard way of what can happen when you tangle with Eminem, but at least his situation wasn't as extreme as the next person we'll be talking about, who actually had to switch genres after beefing with M in 2012, a rapper by the name of MGK would post to Twitter in reference to Eminem's daughter Haley, stating, "Okay, so I just saw a picture of Eminem's daughter, and I have to say she is hot, as in the most respectful way possible, because Eminem is king." Now, an interesting point I have to make is that his daughter was 15 at the time, while MGK was 18. Then a few years later, MGK would appear on Hot 97 to fire more shots at M, claiming he is the reason he is pinned from Shade 45. Eminem would just ignore this, so MGK would continue to take it another step further by sneak dissing Eminem in his feature on Tech Nine's track. No reason, claiming that Eminem just raps and that he is not a rap god, which at the time he recently proclaimed himself as on a song that now has 1 billion views on YouTube. And this calls for a response from Eminem, where in Kamikaze, the album where he went for the entire industry's throat, he would call out MGK for sneak diss and grapping the following on the song called Not Alike. I'm talking to you, but you know who the you are, Kelly. I don't use sublims. Sure as hell don't sneak this, but keep commenting on my daughter Haley. Better hope I don't call trick bit. This, don't fly in our city, and because of these few lines, MGK would release the song that started the downfall of his entire rap career. This was the infamous track Rap Devil, sitting at just over 300 million views. MGK spent an entire 5 minutes ranting about Eminem's weird shift in his style, both physically and musically. And for simply being old and angry, surprisingly, this track was met with a lot of positive feedback, with many people commenting things like, "As an Eminem fan, I can say that the song is fire. He killed him in this verse, he so right about M from 10. Years ago, as opposed to now, can we just stop and recognize that this guy pulled out so many receipts? I don't think people acknowledge how hard he dissed M. But as the world was on the edge of their seats thinking they just saw the rap god get Bodied by the rap devil, Eminem would respond first with an interview about how he dissed him on Not Alike. Right after that, the rap game witnessed what many considered the biggest diss track ever killshot by Eminem. The track didn't just throw. Shade It broke records, becoming the song with the most YouTube views in 24 hours. Many even hail it as the greatest diss track ever, seriously, in killshot. Eminem goes all out, tearing apart MGK in ways that's hard to even put into words. But if you want a sense of the impact it had, just check out these reactions from some of the most famous music reviewers on YouTube. Machine Gun Kelly's response to this was literally just a tweet and sweeping the whole situation under the rug. So what impact did this have on MGK's career and his reputation in rap? Well, MGK himself summed it up. He tried to capitalize on the publicity from the beef by releasing a hip-hop album and an EP right after. But since these projects followed the infamous beef with Eminem, they didn't really get much attention now. MGK has pivoted to punk rock and has tried to challenge Eminem again. It's a complete genre switch for him. And he's mostly known as the guy who's with Megan Fox. He's moved on from a gangster image to a more emo style, complete with painted nails and a more emotionally open persona, as one comment put it. He went from gangsta to emo in just 2 songs. But as notable as MGK's clash with Eminem was the next person we're going to look at. Didn't quite manage to stand up to Eminem in the same way that Machine Gun Kelly did. Eminem versus Ja Rule is arguably one of the most famous beefs in hip-hop history, where 4 titans of the time would go head-to-head in an all-out war. Benzino versus Eminem and 50 Cent versus Ja Rule. So what happened to those who tried to step to the newly signed 50 Cent and Slim Shady? Well, originally this beef started in 2002, where Benzino would make an appearance in the Hot 97 studio and discussed how Eminem was disrespectful to him in Puerto Rico, and then finished his interview with a freestyle firing "This is at Eminem." Then a few weeks after this, M and 50 Cent would both appear in the Hot 97 studio to attack Benzino, stating they might have to dig through the trash to find his record. And rather than refer to him as Benzino, they refer to him as Has Benzo. Then while 50 and Ja Rule are battling it out, Benzino decides to start a full-out war against Eminem, where he would release the track "I Don't Want To" and attempt to go for Eminem's throat, saying, "I don't care how much records you sold. You can't walk through the hood without the men in black. You disrespect your moms. You deserve a smack." Then he would also release "Pull Your Skirt Up," where he would spit the 203 Vanilla Ice, "How you playing it? If you ask me, you ain't really nice. You overrated it." And this might have just been a huge mistake, as almost instantly Eminem would drop back with literally 3 raps. And these lyrics are insane. You sit behind a desk at the Source, buck his and begging for guest appearances. You can't even get clearances because real lyricists don't even respect you or take you serious. It's not that we don't like you, we hate you, period. By the end of 2002, as seemed Benzino and Eminem's beef was over with, obviously Eminem taking the win, and now radio stations were starting to refuse playing any Benzino tracks. Damn yet. This is where we are introduced to Ja Rule in the Eminem story, as while Ja is beefing with 50, he would seemingly randomly fire shots at Eminem in defense of Benzin, saying, quote, "Eminem, your mother's a crackhead and Kim is a known. So what's Haley going to be when she grows up?" And this was obviously a huge mistake. If there's one thing rappers should know, is definitely don't go for Eminem's daughter in response to this. Shady Records would release multiple tracks like the Conspiracy Freestyle and Hail Mary featuring 50 Cent, where they let him have it in September 2003. Benzino would rejoin this beef in an insane way, where he would pay $155, year zero, for racist tapes of Eminem and send them off to the press. This included the song Foolish Pride, where Eminem is literally heard saying "never dated black girl, because blacks only want your money, because I don't like that N-word. I'm just here to make a bigger hit," and this was confirmed to be Eminem, meaning he was forced to respond to this leap. The tape they played today was something I made out of anger, stupidity, and frustration when I was a teenager. I just broken up with my girlfriend, who was an African American, and I reacted like the angry, stupid kid I was. I hope people take it for the foolishness that I was not for what somebody is trying to make it into today. Following this, Eminem would release Bully, a diss track aimed at Ja Rule with some harsh lyrics. The leak of Eminem, surprisingly, didn't negatively affect at all, and the common talk was that Eminem destroyed them both. In this beef, and for Ja Rule, this was extremely evident, judging by the copy sold alone before this beef. Each album he would drop would sell at a minimum of 600,000 copies. Then just a year after, he struggled to even sell a sixth of this, hitting barely 100,000 copies sold. And after a break of releasing any albums, he came back in 2012 to sell only 3,200 copies. That's cool.